Pushkin.
Today we have Aoife O'Donovan on the show, and to be honest, couldn't have been better timing. Only a handful of days ago, Grammy nominations came out, and our guest today was nominated for 2 awards. Best Folk Album for her All My Friends record, and Best American Roots Song for the album's title track. Aoife is a wonderfully prolific singer and songwriter from the Americana tradition, who perhaps also surprisingly has an academic background, having studied improvisation at the New England Conservatory of Music. Over the years, she's performed with many different groups and with orchestras and symphonies, and since 2010, she's put out a handful of beautiful solo works. Her latest Grammy-nominated effort, All My Friends, is a gorgeous set of songs inspired by the life and work of suffragist Carrie Chapman Catt, and celebrates the 100-year anniversary of women securing the right to vote in the U.S. through the 19th Amendment. In Aoife's conversation with Bruce Headlam on today's episode, you'll hear more about how the project crystallized for her and some of the challenges it posed. She'll also play some songs. So enjoy, and Aoife, congratulations on the Grammy nod. This is Broken Record, liner notes for the digital age. I'm Justin Richmond. Just a quick note here. You can listen to all of the music mentioned in this episode on our playlist, which you can find a link to in the show notes. For licensing reasons, each time a song is referenced in this episode, you'll hear this sound effect. All right, enjoy the episode. Here's Bruce Headlam and Aoife O'Donovan.
Let's start with your new album this year, All My Friends. Can you tell me about the genesis of it, how it started, where it came from?
Yes, I made this album over the last several years, actually. It was the longest sort of extended period of time I've spent making one album. The music started with this little seed of an idea that I got from the Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra. They commissioned me to write a piece, a 20-minute piece, or, thereabouts, of music honoring the 19th Amendment, in memory of the 19th Amendment, having something to do with the 19th Amendment. It could really be whatever I wanted it to be. It didn't have to have text. It didn't have to be anything other than that I had to write it. So with that framework in mind, I wrote the first 5 songs on All My Friends, the first 5 songs that became All My Friends, and then kind of sat on that, performed it with Orlando, performed it with the Knights in Central Park, performed it with a couple of orchestras, and never really thought it would turn into an album. But it did. I was commissioned then by Fresh Grass Festival to write another collection of songs that I tied into the original 5, and that is what the album is.
Had you ever written orchestral music before?
I hadn't, and I had, performed with orchestras in the past. I have charts for my, pre-existing repertoire, but I had never written songs with the intention for their original form to be orchestral. Mm-hmm. And so it was a pretty daunting task. I was so lucky to work with an orchestrator and arranger, this woman named Tanner Porter, who really helped me take my melodic and harmonic ideas, and she is the one who put them on the page and wrote those kind of wacky woodwind parts that I could never, who knows what clef those guys are in.
Yeah, I know. They use those 2 in between clefs.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's the tenor clef. You're like, hey, you're done. It's like violas do the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. No, alto clef, I think, is viola, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, one of those. So it sounds like a theater piece in a way. Was it ever conceived of as like, were people ever going to be on stage doing it in character?
No, that was never my intent. It's funny. I feel like I was sort of this theater kid in high school, but I was really always just a musician because I'm actually a horrible actor. And I was always, the last person in the callback. It was always between me and one other person. And the only reason I was there is because I could sing. But okay. I never got those lead roles because in the end, I would start laughing or break the fourth wall or just lose my cool. And it was never for me.
That's not what they needed in MAME.
No. The funny thing about All My Friends is that it came out in March, which is the same month that a great Broadway show about suffrage also went up by Shayna Taub called Suffs. And it's been cool to sort of have people come up to me and say, have you heard of this musical Suffs? And it's, really dealing with a lot of the same topics, although a different, more nuanced take. Obviously, I think she did. She went way deeper into the story and really created full storylines for all of these historical characters. Mine is more of a kind of, I wouldn't say surface level, but it's a miniaturized version of that.
Okay, but it was your songs were inspired by one particular suffragette. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about her? Suffragist. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Wow. Am I out of date?
I was corrected, actually, initially by somebody who sent me a very nice email at the very beginning of this. This is many years ago when I first started even talking about that I had been commissioned to do this. And I was using the term suffragette. And she said, I think that you might want to look into this because I really believe that the term that is more sort of accurate is suffragist because, putting E-T-T-E is maybe a diminutive that's not necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about the woman who inspired you.
Carrie Chapman Catt is who inspired a bunch of songs on this record, and I was really able to use her experience, her womanhood, her tenacity, and the way her speeches, her letters, her words, her voice, to kind of really, that's really what gave me the kind of the legs that I needed to really get this piece moving. I was reading a book called The Woman's Hour by Elaine Weiss, a great writer who was also a consultant on the musical stuffs. And it opens really with the story of Carrie Chapman Catt being at the forefront of the final days of marching to get the 36th state, their ratification of Tennessee, and sort of her involvement, her take. And when I went and started kind of Googling it and looking into it, I found so much text that she had written, so many speeches and all these letters and correspondences that she had had. And I was really just moved by them. And her voice just seemed to kind of jump off the page. And I wanted to sing these words.
Mm-hmm. What was that like, trying to write to someone else's voice? I don't know if you've really done that before. Well, I'm sure you've done songs in other people's voices, but in this way.
It was difficult, but I think what made it easier, honestly, is the fact that when I wrote this music initially, I wrote the music first. I didn't start with text. I didn't actually even at that point. The arrangements, the charts needed to get made. This is November, December of 2020. The piece was supposed to be premiered in May of 2021. I needed to get the arranger of the music so that the arranger could start arranging it so that the orchestra could get it to, do the markings and start learning it. So at this point, I was working on my previous album, Age of Apathy, and it's coming out of a real deep writer's block, kind of dark, I don't even want to write anything, I have nothing to say, period in my life. And I somehow managed to find the inspiration to write the music and kind of get the basic idea of what I wanted to do these 5 songs that were going to kind of connect with each other, but I wasn't sure exactly what the text was going to be. And it wasn't until a few months later that I kind of got the meat for the story and really put it together that way.
So when you were writing those charts without this character, without these songs, were you writing a top line? Were you doing a melody?
I was doing a melody, yep. And I did have some placeholder lyrics, and some of the songs did have some lyrics. All My Friends, the first song, had the first verse. Mm-hmm. I was really just sort of envisioning that sort of, just that idea of all my friends, you come and go, and there are highs and lows in your life, and kind of it could really apply to anything, and I ended up making it much more specific as the song went on. And the song Daughters also where, I really am not singing from Carrie Chapman Catt's perspective. That's kind of from my own perspective looking back. And that song had maybe half of the lyrics in, but the other 3 were just melody lines and harmony lines and melodic ideas and harmonic structure.
You may be the first songwriter to put a melody to the words by Woodrow Wilson. Noted lyric writer.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
He's a really complicated character in American history, and a lot of negative connotations. And he was not, by no means a great guy, but he really was an ally of the suffragists. And it's interesting to sort of, from a historical lens, say, okay, there are these people in our country's history who really sucked in many ways, but what did they do to advance this cause, even while they may have been pushing back other causes for justice? Mm-hmm. It's something that I think we do have to grapple with as Americans.
Right. And the song is called War Measure.
The song is called War Measure, and it comes from a letter that he wrote to Carrie Chapman Catt, responding to her. And he's saying, okay, the women are a war measure. We could not win the Great War without women staying home on the front lines at home and sort of picking up the slack. And that was his angle, one of his angles, to say that, you guys deserve the vote because look at all the stuff you're doing here.
Mm-hmm. He felt it was a debt that was owed.
He kind of owed them.
Uh-huh. And was that sort of Was that a political argument he was making? Like, I've got to make this argument and this might work?
I think it's hard to say exactly what the motive was. I feel like you can really apply it to today too. There are so many, people have their hands in so many different pockets in politics, and how do you please everybody without alienating this other, without alienating your base, so to speak.
Right.
So I'm not sure, but I that song is kind of one of my favorite ones to sing because I kind of tried to make it kind of like a body, sort of like raucous kind of barroom type of song. It's still obviously very folky, but with the brass, and it's a fun one to do live.
Speaking of people with complicated legacies, a lot of the original suffragists, Susan B. Anthony and some of the slightly more famous ones, at one point separated their cause from African-American enfranchisement. But Carrie Chapman Catt didn't. She's interesting in that way.
She didn't, but she also was separate from a younger kind of cohort of suffragists, and there were many different factions of the whole movement. And I think it's a lesson that, gosh, it's so hard to get anything done. And I feel that somebody like Carrie Chapman Catt, who, we don't know her, she's no longer here, but after the 19th Amendment, she did become a big champion of the civil rights cause and was involved in that after she had, helped to pass this legislation. I don't know. It's sort of hard to sort of look back and cast judgment for me as a human being, and it's been a difficult thing as I've kind of done this record, because there have been people who have stood up and say, well, why, somebody stood up at a show recently and kind of called me out for saying that, why did you choose to highlight Carrie Chapman Catt, and why didn't you choose to do this in the voice of Ida B. Wells? And I was sort of like, well, I think that would have created a whole, you kind of can't necessarily
right. I don't know what I'm saying, right? But that would be
another sort of awkward situation.
You said, that's a different awkward conversation.
But initially, I actually had wanted to do that. I had wanted to make this piece be from 5 different suffragists' perspective, and that's something that maybe I'll do down the road. And I think that Shayna did that pretty well in Suffs, where she really did take all those characters. And again, that's sort of like a life's work type of piece. But this is my sort of first dipping my toes in the water of even anything topical.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I think my statement is that I'm just a singer. I'm just a folk singer, and this is sort of my way of telling this story through my own art form, which is ultimately folk songs. Me and a guitar singing these songs, trying to connect them with people, with the audience, and with the musicians that I'm playing with. You
mentioned that the last state to ratify the 19th Amendment was, or the state that
the 36th state,
the state that made it the law was Tennessee, and she did not, and she was pushed to argue against giving Black women the vote because that probably would have passed a little easier, but she didn't do that.
Right.
Now, she did say some things about interracial marriage and some other things. She was a creature of the 19th century, far from perfect.
It's true, and just sometimes I think a lot about what these women were dealing with and what they were experiencing as they were growing up. And there's another song on the record, sort of much more from my perspective, called Someone to Follow. But I really started that song thinking about what were the mothers of the suffragists like? Who were the women that raised these women who ended up really changing the world? And was their feminism championed by their own mothers and grandmothers? I mean, likely not in most cases, but I suppose we'll never quite know the answer to that.
Well, in the case of Carrie Chapman Catt, she had sort of a traumatic life growing up. She wasn't wealthy. Her first husband died very soon after they were married.
Right, when she went to San Francisco, and he died pretty soon after that.
So, it wasn't... she didn't have an easy life.
No, and she really had to overcome a lot to sort of... And there's a song actually called The Right Time that's kind of about my imagining of her early life and how she kind of got through that.
I thought that was a very interesting song because so many of the other songs are... they're not marching songs exactly, but they're kind of exclamatory. And what are we going to do? And suddenly you have this song where it's more self-conscious and it's questioning.
Right. When is it going to be the right time?
Is that something you got from her letters, from speeches, or is that just something you tried to imagine? There must have been a point in which this complete powerhouse thought to herself, is this going to work?
That really is from my imagination, that song. But I think that any strong woman can relate to that idea of even whatever the facade is, whatever the front is, even if you're the most confident, successful person in the world, you obviously have moments of self-doubt or of wondering, like, am I on the right path? Is this the right thing to do? Will anybody remember me after I go? And is it my time? Is it my time?
Mm-hmm. Do you want to give us a song?
Sure.
All right.
Do you want me to play that song?
You can play any song you like.
Great. This is so fun.
It's beautiful. I won't turn this into a masterclass, but I want you to walk me through the first few chords of that.
Okay.
For our guitarists out there. And capo on the fifth fret
Capo
for
on the
those
fifth
playing
fret.
along at home.
Yep.
Okay, let's find out where all that great finger picking came from.
We'll be right back with more from Aoife O'Donovan after the break. We're back with more from Aoife O'Donovan.
Did you grow up in a musical family?
I did. I grew up, both my parents are musicians. My father was an incredible singer, guitar player, radio host.
He was a professional musician.
He was a professional music guy. He had a radio program on WGBH and was a much beloved member of the Boston music community. He's from Ireland. He passed away about a year ago. Mm-hmm. Very sadly, and we miss him so much. He was really the person who, I would say both of my parents were kind of my biggest cheerleaders and champions growing up playing music. And unlike many people who grew up with musician parents, I really wanted to be them. I wanted to have their life. I loved their social life, their music community, their friends. They would always have, bands staying at our house. They would always have these epic music parties at their house where my mom would play the piano and people would just stand around the piano singing all night. And when I was in high school, my friends and I, we would, it was like a cool thing. At least I guess I thought it was cool. Maybe it wasn't. But I'm so glad that it turned out that way and that I didn't rebel against it and, only want to, do something totally different.
Was it traditional Irish music they played?
Not really. My dad's radio show is mostly traditional Irish music, but it's really just kind of songs, kind of like the culture of a sing-song. Anybody who's spent time in Ireland and in kind of that community knows that phrase. There's a thing that people do called a sing-song. And my whole dad's extended family, we love a sing-song where you just get around and everybody kind of has their cover that they sing, their song, and my mom knows all the songs on the piano, or somebody passes around a guitar and you just kind of, it's like a jam, basically a jam, but a jam with all singing and no instrumentals and no solos.
What was your first sing-song performance?
My first.
It made me very happy if the answer is like Tainted Love or something by Heart.
Well, no, you're going to laugh at this. So when I was much younger, one of my favorite songs to sing that I really sang first at karaoke at the Inchydoney Hotel in, I think it was like 1994, maybe. I think I was probably like 11 or 12. I sang Leader of the Pack.
Wow.
Remember? I met him at the candy store.
Fabulous.
I gotta bring that back. I just realized I need to bring that one back for my karaoke repertoire.
So that's the first song you did, Leader of the Pack?
That is in the first batch. But as I got a little bit older, I really used to love to sing The Dimming of the Day. That was one of my party pieces that I would do with my parents.
The Richard Thompson song. Okay. Any other Richard? We've interviewed Richard Thompson. We're going to do it again. So
I love to sing 1952 Vincent Black Lightning. That really became more of a sing-song song as I got a little bit older. I used to do that song all the time.
Can you do the guitar part to that?
I kind of have my own version of it that I do. I don't do nobody can play like Richard Thompson, but I do mine just like that.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, he's amazing.
He does his own. I mean, you can't. I feel like with Richard Thompson, you can't try to imitate his guitar playing. You just have to kind of, do it your own way.
There's too much going on there.
The song speaks for itself. Yeah.
And so when did the guitar start for you? Or was guitar your first instrument?
No, guitar was absolutely not my first instrument. I played piano growing up and mostly I just sang. And I didn't start playing guitar. I mean, I took some guitar lessons in high school and could kind of play basic chords. And my first band, Crooked Still, I didn't play guitar at all in that band. I just sang. And it wasn't until that band really stopped touring. I mean, I was playing guitar I would do the occasional solo show in New York at Rockwood, or I was writing songs on guitar, but I didn't really start playing guitar and kind of developing my guitar style until, I would say, until I turned 30 probably, until, the last 10, 11 years.
Was there a particular song or experience that made you think, yeah, I can do this?
I'm waiting for that. I still am like, can I play the guitar?
It was leader of the pack.
Well, no, honestly, I feel like it actually probably, when I started to get more serious about the guitar was when I decided I was going to make a solo album, and I knew I was going to have to, lead a band and play all of these songs on the guitar. And my mind, I would hear these things in my head that I would want to play on guitar, but I needed to figure out how to play them on guitar. So it was sort of, I feel like the songs helped me find my way around them. You know what I mean? Like I had the songs, but my hands needed to follow my brain.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think for so many people, it's the other way around, which is they just start shapes on the guitar and then the songs come out of that.
Yeah, and that's not the way it is for me. Yeah.
Did you figure them out on the piano, or
I would just figure them out in my head, and then I would have to could hear them in my head and have to find them on an instrument.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. When did the song start?
I started writing songs, when I was really young. I remember the first two songs that I feel like were complete songs I wrote with my friend Sarah Heaton, who is an opera singer. She's in the Met Chorus. And we had a band we were in 7th grade, and the band was called Fairy Mist, Faerie. Mm-hmm. It's very inspired by the Indigo Girls and by The Story, that great band with Jennifer Kimball and Jonathan Brooke.
Oh, right.
And I think we basically just wanted to be either of those two female duos. And we made this little cassette demo of these two songs. One of them was an original called Lover's Secrets that I have the tape somewhere. It's kind of hilarious, but it's a good song for two 12-year-olds. And then we set the E.E. Cummings poem Maggie and Millie and Molly and May to music. And I played it on the piano.
That sounds like a really good idea.
It was cool. It was like, it had all these cool sort of major to minor mode things going. It was cool.
Mm-hmm. I think more people should probably do that.
Yeah.
I think I heard Andrew Bird did a song by, oh my God, her name's just flown out of my head. She's only the most, Emily Dickinson. Thank you. And I thought, well, this is going to be terrible. I thought, actually, this is really good.
I bet.
Yeah. It actually really worked. And you sort of think, oh, this is going to be too dramatic and high school. But no, it was.
I think somebody like Andrew Bird is definitely up for the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we should leave it to him. And then you went to New England Conservatory.
I did.
In fact, if you look up, I just did this. I thought, when you look up New England Conservatory alumni, the first picture is Coretta Scott King.
Oh, gosh.
And you're the second on Google.
Wow. Maybe that's just your Google. You ever wonder that? Because they knew you were searching for me?
Do I have a Google?
I don't know. Don't you? Isn't that is that really true? Me and Coretta Scott King? What company to keep?
Maybe it was. Well, and Rose Kennedy is up there, so they've covered the rest of the Boston Irish.
Exactly. They're just covering their bases here.
They've got the lace curtain.
I love
Irish.
it. Coretta Scott King, my mother-in-law, my late mother-in-law was at New England Conservatory. Ivy Jacobson. That was one of the things that my husband and I first bonded on, was that I went to NEC and his mom had gone there. She was a flute player. But it was a great place for me. I have to give it so much credit for opening my mind in ways that I never could have imagined.
How did you, because you went in as someone, were you considering an opera career or something else?
No, I went into the contemporary improvisation department, which at that time, this was in 2000 when I started, it was basically part of the jazz department. It was separate, but there were so few kids in CI that I think there were like 3 undergrads when I started. So we were really kind of lumped into the jazz department, even though I was not a jazz musician at all. Mm-hmm. I knew nothing about jazz. I still know nothing about jazz, but it kind of kicked my ass in a way, because I was around all these people who were so musically virtuosic. They had this deep theoretical, language that they could speak. They had these great chops, this great rhythm, and I felt a little bit like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? What do I have to offer? But it was really fun. I remember actually those first couple of weeks getting together with kids in the basement of the dorms and having these just late night jam sessions, just improvising, singing, making up shit, and just kind of going for it.
Were you playing guitar at that point?
Not really. I was really still mostly just singing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think I was playing. I don't even know if I had a guitar with me. I was just singing and playing piano.
Right. That's amazing. And is it 4 years you did?
I actually did 3 years. So I switched halfway out. I switched from the bachelor's program. My 3rd year, I really wanted to tour, and I knew I didn't want to stay in for 4 years, so I switched to an artist diploma program.
And then what did it give you the theory? Are you now going to point out C minor 13th?
Well, it's funny. It definitely did give me all that theory that I use and I do use all the time. I think that people always say, oh, Bob Dylan couldn't read music, or, that people love to sort of shout out these things like, just because you can do this, it doesn't mean you're better. And that's absolutely true. Many of the greatest musicians that I know don't know, a third from a fifth. But I will say that as a sideman and as a collaborator, it's so handy to have that skill set in your back pocket, and it just makes things go a lot faster. Right. To be able to know what the chords are when you want somebody to play along with you. You can shout out the chords, you can shout out the key, you can shout out the shapes, you can say the numbers, or you can say the actual chord. You can transpose things quickly in your head. All of those things, I think that if you're, young people listening, if you're considering a career in music, like it doesn't hurt, definitely doesn't hurt.
It's better than shouting out, Bob Dylan, he couldn't play. It's like, thanks
you know
so
what
much.
I mean, though? I think that people sort of love to, and it's great. There are many people, like I said, who I love to play with who don't speak that language, but I mean no disrespect to them.
They bring something else to the table. So then what were your first, you said you wanted to tour, what were your first steps as a professional?
So it was right around that time that my band Crooked Still started. It was a string band where we did mostly old bluegrass songs, old, source recording old time songs that we would find and rearrange for our untraditional instrumentation. We had a crazy cellist named Rashad Eggleston who really was one of the first people to do the chop on the cello. He was at Berkeley. Greg List, this great banjo player who was getting a PhD at MIT at the time, and he now teaches at Berklee College of Music. And a bass player who was also at NEC named Corey DeMario. We were a quartet. We started playing gigs my freshman year of college and really started touring. And that's kind of what I wanted to do was go on the road and be with Crooked Still and make records and tour.
And then you also did radio. You did the Prairie Home Companion.
Yep, that was a couple years later that started. That was a huge part of my life in both configurations, with Garrison Keillor first for many, many years. And then when it changed over to Chris Thile, I was in the house band for that as well. And that was what
was that experience like?
Really some of the happiest, most fulfilling musical moments of my life, to put it into words. Getting to do that every week. I mean, talk about a good course in having to have your chops be at a certain, level. Chris is obviously, I've worked with Chris for many years. We have a band together called Rodeo Sessions. But he, in that context where he's calling the shots and you're showing up on Friday and learning, 30 songs. I mean, literally often it would be just so much music because you would do sort of half songs, snippets of this. You would do Song of the Week. You would many times be in the band for whatever guest was on the show. So you'd have to learn, all of Trey Anastasio's songs, all the parts for that, all the harmony parts, et cetera.
It's just one song. Just goes on a long time. What were you'd only have a day to rehearse for that?
You'd show up on Friday morning. And a lot of the times you would not even get, for the first couple of years that Chris was doing it, he was doing this thing called Song of the Week. And he would be writing the song all week. And he often wouldn't finish it until the middle of the night on Thursday. So you would wake up on Friday morning with an MP3 in your inbox and have to basically learn the song by the rehearsal, which usually started at 12.
Wow.
And then you would have the rehearsal from like 12 to 10, and then you'd go back the next day and start sometimes as early as like 7:30 in the morning and then do the show. It was such a rush. It was really, really fun.
Yeah, it must have been. It must have just been terrifying, but in that...
But everybody's in it together. So it's this sort of real communal terrifying thing of just saying, okay, we got this. And it's live radio. That's the thing. It's live and then it happens and it's over.
It sounds like you're like playing in the NFL or something. It's just like doing an award show every week.
Yeah, it was so much fun.
Tell me about I wasn't going to ask you about the guests, but now that you mentioned it, can you remember any experiences that stand out with the guests?
Oh my gosh. I mean, tons. I mean, that first show, this was right when Chris took over. That was the one with Trey. That was like just such a blast. There was one that we did with Gregory Alan Isaacoff that was really special. I got to sing with Renee Fleming, with Garrison, actually, the first time. That was another time that I got to sing with a guest. Bonnie Vare, I got to sing with Bonnie Vare on that show. The list goes on and on. It was every week it was somebody different who was incredible, and getting to just sing harmonies with.
I talked to someone who did this analysis of Renee Fleming, and they ran her voice through it, and apparently she can hit just dead center of every note.
She's a real magical singer.
Yeah, and no slide when she's going up to it. He said it was surreal. Like you never see someone who can sing like that.
Yeah, and she still got it.
Oh yeah. So tell me then, you had that project. You've had other projects. You did Goat Rodeo with Yo-Yo Ma. I guess you should explain that.
That really came through Chris and Edgar Meyer, both, and Stuart. I mean, that's kind of my world there, the Bluegrassers. When that started in 2011, I think that's when that started. They were writing music, and they knew they wanted to have some vocals on the album, but Chris didn't want to do it by himself, or Edgar thought that it should be a duet. And I think he had heard Chris and I sing Farewell Angelina at Telluride a couple years before, and he's like, what about you and Aoife do a couple songs? So we wrote those 2 songs that are on the first record together, and then for the next record, which was almost a decade later, I actually got together with them and wrote the music and the lyrics for those 2 songs that are on the newer one.
And they don't, people who, I grew up with certain classical popular music crossovers. Yehudi Menuhin famously did albums with Stefan Grappelli, who's the great jazz violinist. And, it was a kind of a party trick that never really worked, right. But it was nice to be at the party. This is something completely different.
Well, Yo-Yo is, I think, he has managed to avoid falling into that trap of being somebody else's party trick. He's there's not really any musical figure quite like him, I think, alive today, and I don't know if there really ever has been or will be. He's a 1 in a million guy, musician, player, cellist, and his taste for creating something special is infectious. He pulls people together. He sits back, he does his thing, and he lets everything else kind of come around it and sort of envelop it in whatever it's doing. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So in Goat Rodeo, he's not being asked to do the same stuff that Stuart and Edgar and Chris are doing. He's being asked to be himself and play these gorgeous melodic lines and harmonize with the other string instruments and provide the rhythm that only he can do in his way. And then they managed to sort of create what almost sounds like a chamber orchestra with just these 4 instruments. And it's really special. I think it doesn't sound like crossover at all. I think it just sounds like music.
It sounds like it's its own thing. That's what I mean. It doesn't have that kind of, Pavarotti sings the classics.
And I think that Yo-Yo achieves that as well in other sort of collaborations that he does across the board. The Silk Road Ensemble, and when it first started, was really a lot of that sort of world music and bringing people in, and it never sounded cheesy or forced to me.
No, he's just a great experimenter, I guess.
Exactly. And it's really honest and authentic. And I think that's when you can sniff that somebody's doing something to be a crossover thing, that's when you start to lose me.
Yeah. So your first album was Fossils, and if someone looked at the album, looked at the photo, looked at the titles, they would think, oh, someone's doing a traditional Irish album. But it's you.
It's me.
It's your songs.
It's all my songs.
How did that come naturally out of the songs you'd been doing before, or was that something you thought, no, I'm gonna make everybody think it's one thing?
No, that really did come naturally out of the songs that I had been working on. Your first solo album, obviously, I was 29 when I made it. So it was everything that I had, not everything, but the 10 best songs that I had written up to that point. And I really had to, quite a few to choose from. But that was I really wanted to do it. I wanted to make a solo album. I wanted to work with Tucker Martine. That was kind of a dream of mine in my 20s, was to get to make a record with Tucker. And it's
tell us about why.
Tucker Martine had made some records that really just knocked me out when I was in the early 2000s. His records with Laura Veers, I loved so much. I still love so much. But it was in particular a record he made with Sarah Siskind, who I first met in, I think, 2003 or 2004. A great singer-songwriter. She was filling in a band that I was in called the Wayfaring Strangers, and this was before she had the sort of viral success she ended up having with Bon Iver covering her song, and with writing for the TV show Nashville and doing all this stuff. And being quite a lauded writer that she is now. But she made this record called Covered. She gave it to me, gave me a copy of the CD in 2003 or 2004, whenever it was. And I remember getting home and putting it in my car and I was like, what is this music? What is this production? Who made this record? Someday I want to make a record with whoever this guy is. And it really happened. It's just really cool.
Mm-hmm. And then you were covered by Alison Krauss.
Yeah, so that happened before I made my record.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm. And I remember getting that call. She covered my song Lay My Burden Down. She first covered it for a movie called Get Low with Bill Murray and Robert Duvall, and then they ended up recutting it for a Union Station record called People
Which had to
Airplane.
feel affirming.
Oh, it was I think that was the moment where I was like, maybe I can, write songs and I can sing them.
Mm-hmm. Because she's a little like Yo-Yo Ma in that whatever else she does, she's got incredible taste.
She really does.
Like she doesn't hit too many bad notes.
Yeah, talk about singing in the center of a pitch.
Yeah, no, incredible voice. Did it change the way you were writing at that point? Was it still just, I got the song in my head all?
Yeah, it didn't really change my approach to the craft itself, but it definitely gave me probably a much needed boost of confidence to say, okay, I can be, I even still, am like, am I a songwriter? Am I a singer-songwriter? What is it exactly that I do? But that was the first moment where somebody else said, okay, we like this song and we want to sing it. And that's a huge compliment to any songwriter.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a check coming. That's another nice thing for a singer.
You're right.
Yeah, that's a good thing too. But you said you ran into writer's block. Was that before the Age of Apathy or?
That was before the Age of Apathy. So after Fossils, I made a record called In the Magic Hour. I did a bunch of stuff in the interim. My band, I'm With Her, et cetera. When COVID hit is really, I just come out of a 2-year tour with I'm With Her. My child was 2, a little bit more than 2. She was 2 in a couple of months. And I really hadn't stopped in a long time. And I had made no time to sort of sit and be creative and think about what I wanted to say and what kind of songs were going to come out. So that whole first 6 months of COVID, I was really just like, I think many people were kind of stricken with, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And out of that, it was really when I moved to Florida that somehow something kind of got unlocked and I was able to sort of re-access that side of myself. And I'm so grateful because it's once the door kind of got pushed open, it's just continued to be fruitful.
Okay, but it was 6 months during COVID.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's right.
I'm sure there's much more writer's block down the road for me.
So, then you made Age of Apathy with one of our favorite people here, Joe Henry.
One of the greats.
One of the greats. How did that come about?
I first met Joe in 2014 in Cincinnati. I was doing a show with the Cincinnati Pops called American Originals, where we were singing the songs of Stephen Foster, and it was Roseanne Cash. That's also where I met Roseanne Cash, who's become a friend. Joe Henry, Dom Flemons was there. The great band Over the Rhine was there. It was a really special weekend of music, and I really hit it off with Joe. And I didn't see him that often over the next decade or 8 years. But I knew, again, he was somebody who I was like, I want to make a record with Joe. I love the way his records sound, his solo records. I love the way the records he produces sound. And I just knew we had a kinship, we had a vibe. And I knew he was the right person for Age of Apathy. When I got to Florida and I started making the demos for Age of Apathy, I think I'd made like 3 demos. And I just kind of cold called him. And I was like, can we talk? Are you interested in making this record? It's COVID. We're not going to be able to do it in a traditional way where we're in the studio together, but I think this will work if I make these demos and send them to you and you send them back. And it worked so well. It was so much fun.
Well, you're lucky it was COVID because he's in Maine.
I know.
You're like, you don't want to go there in the winter.
He had just moved too. It was really, he had just gotten to Maine when we were starting these conversations.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
No, I'm from Massachusetts. I know.
Yeah, of course. Just as an aside, Roseanne Cash, one of the first people we interviewed for the show, and Joe both helped us. Malcolm and I did a book with Paul Simon, and they both contributed chapters. But the producers cut Joe's, and I was so disappointed.
Oh.
I know. He did this amazing riff on the song Duncan. I don't know if you know that song.
I do, and it's funny because I feel like I've heard Joe play that song before.
He's played it,
yeah.
but he did this big thing about how it's like The Boxer, but different in the same way that To Have and Have Not is different from Casablanca, but kind of the same.
Okay.
And it was so genius.
I got to read that book.
It's an audiobook. And then Roseanne and her, I don't know if you know her husband.
Yeah, John, of course.
They did Only Living Boy in New York. And
Cool.
they just talked about the production, because the production of that song is so incredible.
Is it on Audible, or how do I get this?
I don't know how you, that's terrible.
I'll find it.
Yeah.
That's so cool. One of the, and I still say the best nights of my life, the top 3 nights of my life was seeing Paul Simon at Madison Square Garden
Really?
in 2018. It really was, just one of those moments that, gosh, I actually went with Sarah Droz.
Yeah.
The two of us went, we bought tickets, we were in the 13th row, and we were sobbing the entire time. It was so good.
Yeah. So many good songs.
So many good songs. And also, what a great performer. My favorite part of that show was how much better he sounded at the end of the concert than he sounded at the beginning. He was so warmed up by the end.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't want it to stop. He really felt like his voice was just opening up and opening up and opening up. And then by the last couple of songs, he had every shade.
We'll be back with the rest of Bruce's conversation with Aoife O'Donovan after the break. We're back with the rest of Bruce's conversation with Aoife O'Donovan.
So a couple songs I wanted to ask you particularly about. There's a lot of great songs on Age of Apathy. It's such a good album. But Elevators was one of the songs that for some reason I was really taken with. Can you just talk a bit about that song?
Yeah, that song is one of my favorite songs on Age of Apathy also. I remember starting to write that song and just kind of having this movie playing in my mind of me watching like a movie of myself in the rearview mirror, like of my youth, sort of my more wild days as a touring musician, and just the concept of, have I been here before? Like waking up and looking out the window, literally, and the first line of the song is looking out the window, wondering, like, if I've been here before, that looks the same, that looks the same, that looks the same, and how when you are a musician and you live on the road, you tend to be able to pinpoint events based on the randomest things, like who was I dating at the time, or who was my bandmate dating at the time, or all these things that just end up being sort of silly and trite, but really are coloring the fabric of your life in this funny way. And that's kind of where that song came from.
And you need that because every day you're just waking up at a Holiday Inn Express.
Yeah, every day is the same in this one way, and it's so monotonous to get in the van and to stop at the gas station and get the same snack that you always get at the gas station because you're sick of, for a while it's smart food, and then you switch to some other sort of healthy thing, like, oh, I'm going to eat beef jerky on this tour or something. But it's and I feel like musicians just have this. You have your routines that you go through when you're on tour all the time. And there's sort of no clear way to mark the time. Like, when was I in this venue? And then you see your name on the wall and you're like, what? I don't even remember writing that. It's very trippy.
Yeah. It was your beef jerky tour.
Yeah. It's like, oh, yeah. Oh, that was the tour that, like, her boyfriend was there with us for, like, that. And that was so awkward. Like, just weird memories like that.
Sure. Oh. So I want to ask you, we're now up to your current album. I want to ask you about Daughters.
Yeah.
Tell me about that song.
That song was one of the first songs that I think I wrote in its entirety for Age of Apathy. And I think I mentioned at the beginning of the interview that I did have some of the lyrics intact before I sent that one off to the arranger. I was imagining, or I was just sitting there thinking about, who were these women, who were the suffragists, and what did they think we were going to be saying about them? Did they know how important the work they were doing was? And when I get to the chorus, I'm singing, I say, all your enemies never leave your side. And it's just sort of that idea of, no matter, even if the fight has been won, there's still going to be a shadow of your opponent next to you forever, potentially. But how do we overcome that? And how do we get past that? And my favorite part of that song and that recording is the San Francisco Girls Chorus singing behind me on that chorus, where I'm singing, they will always be there, daughters, dry your eyes. And they're singing behind me, saying, kind of echoing me. And it's this really sort of powerful physical thing. When I listened to it, when I got their parts back, that's exactly as I wanted it to sound. And I wanted it to be me. And this does tie into the song we were just talking about, Elevators, talking to your younger self, talking to the past version of you, or talking to your mother when she was a child or your grandmother when she was a child, and then looking forward, talking to the daughters of your daughters. It's really just sort of the line keeps going.
Mm-hmm. Because it had this theme about your enemies always being with you, there was one line that really struck me as strange, and that is the line about protected and serene rich women still honing their malevolent skills.
Mm-hmm. That part is about the people who were opposed to suffrage, and often the people who, and I feel like we still see this in today's political climate. It's often people with great privilege that are the most fearful of change, because they're not the ones who are being negatively affected by the lack of progress.
We're not going to turn this into a debate, but the suffragette movement, and it's been criticized for this more recently, did rely on often very prosperous benefactors.
Of course.
I mean, famously, Alva Vanderbilt, who had changed her name by that point, but put a lot of her family money into
right.
it. And it seemed like a strange note to hit, because a lot of those women were regarded as privileged. They wouldn't have been able to do it without it.
Right. No, you're not wrong, but I think that in that line, mm-hmm. I was sort of talking about the people who were nay, the right. antis, the people who were against it, who were there were. It wasn't that all the rich people were pro.
No, absolutely.
Suffrage. So it was just one side of it.
Okay.
Honing their malevolent skills, growing bolder in their treachery. So yeah.
I may have been. I didn't talk about this with my wife. I may have been channeling my wife a bit, though, who sort of felt that in the last few years, being a certain kind of woman has not exactly insulated you from criticism.
Yeah.
And you got it with the "Why didn't you do Ida B. Wells?"
Of course.
And it almost seemed like everybody comes from some kind of privilege. Well, not everybody does. Not
everybody, of course, but it is. I mean, I think it's important to acknowledge and to be aware. At least that's what I'm trying to do as a person in the world, to be aware of my own privilege and how, of course, I'm very privileged to be able to sing these songs and to write these songs. But that line, I think I was trying to, later in the song, it kind of comes back like, the women in the fields and counting houses. I'm really talking more about the common woman,
right,
as the song goes on in the next stanza after the chorus comes back. And the women in the shops and in the farms, they're all around us. They got babies crying out their breasts. The veins of these women are not filled with milk and water. These are mothers of bold American daughters. Just really trying to mm-hmm. make it more of a sort of an every man, every woman
right.
type thing, if you will. That was kind of it was a misstep, but I think
no. I don't. You're not to sit there saying, maybe I'm not a songwriter.
That is how I was trying to sort of tie it into these women are sort of sitting in their gilded homes, not out there, even if they were, going to vote yes, which they couldn't vote, obviously, but even if they were pro-suffrage, it wasn't necessarily affecting them in the same way that it was affecting the women who, right. on the frontier.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, that line that the mothers of bold American daughters is just such a great line in that.
I love singing that song. I love singing that song live.
Yeah. No, it's got such a kind of... the other one I wanted to ask you about was, because I think it's one of the... You've got a lot of beautiful, very long... You write very long melodies, by the way. But that's a good thing, right?
I mean, it is what it is. Some people are like, yeah, I think I read a review once of a record of mine, and they were like, her melodies... They're not exactly the kind that you can sing along with. She sort of meanders from one idea to the next.
Cool. I think the answer to that is don't read critics.
No, and I think it was still a positive. It ultimately was positive, but it kind of cracked me up because I'm like, yes, that is exactly what I'm doing.
Isn't that what all melodies do?
Yeah.
But I think one of your loveliest is America Come on this.
Thank you so much.
On that record. Tell me about writing that one.
That one, I think I really just got in my head as kind of this march of like that real mm-hmm. ascending melody to kind of, and all the octave jumps. It's a very hard melody to sing live.
It is. There's big jumps.
But it's funny that I had that melody before I had the phrase, because mm-hmm. I feel like it's in like F, I think is what it is. And I play this one with like I tune my low string up to an F on this one. It's really low and then really high at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it's very jumpy. And
by the way, I've never seen I guess it's like a drop D tuning, but it's an F tuning.
I do. I actually write a lot of songs in that tuning.
Is that common?
I don't know. I don't know anybody else who does it, but
I've never heard of it.
I can't say that I invented it, but I don't know anybody else who does it.
Well, then I think you can say you invented it. I would patent it.
I'm sure Joni's tried it.
She's tried it all. Are you a fan, by the way, of Joni Mitchell?
Oh, come on. Huge fan. Biggest fan.
Okay. I would say some of your songs I can hear that influence a little bit. Elevators actually is a song I can hear a bit of that influence.
I'm a very big Joni Mitchell fan. I love all of her music and her melodies, and her writing is just, I think, unparalleled.
It's funny because in interviews I've read with you, you don't mention Joni Mitchell.
I feel like I do. When I talk about my influences, I feel like I would say Joni Mitchell and Paul Simon are kind of the two people who I would say are my most old school biggest influences.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Those are good influences to have.
And I did a recording of You Turn Me On, I'm a Radio. Mm-hmm. And actually one of my favorite Live From Here performances was Coyote that I got to do at Town Hall with Chris and the Live From Here band.
What's that like to play? That's a really hard song to play.
It was so fun. That was really one of my top musical moments of my life.
Mm-hmm. There's another YouTube clip then you should look at, which is, because I'm Canadian, of course, my number one is Gordon Lightfoot.
Love Gordon Lightfoot.
Gordon Lightfoot had this house in Toronto. He was famous for having these parties that nobody remembered later. But if you look it up, there's a party at his house, and I think he's there and Dylan's there. And then she starts playing an early version of Coyote.
I feel like I've seen this clip on Instagram or something.
Yeah, and at some point they're looking at each other and you realize you guys are kind of out of your depth here. Like they're trying to play along. They're like, we can't tell what she's doing.
They should have gone to music school.
I'm not sure it would have helped because I think her stuff is so idiosyncratic. And that song is a very idiosyncratic song.
I wasn't playing guitar. I was just singing when I did it.
You didn't try and
I didn't even attempt, yeah.
I didn't even know what her tuning was or anything.
I think it's in an open C tuning, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, but it's got it's got its own thing.
So cool.
Yeah, you should look it up if you haven't seen it because there is kind of a nice moment where they're like, oh man, we're screwed. we got nothing. We got nothing. Maybe we get the bass note. Maybe not.
But yeah, too many notes.
Too many notes. Too complicated. In this album, because the album it's not, as I said, it feels like a theater piece. It feels very much of a piece. Then it takes this shift, this album, and I'm sure it was a very deliberate shift. But the last two songs go in a completely different direction.
Totally.
Yeah, starting with Over the Line.
Over the Finish Line. Yeah.
Oh, Over the Finish Line, pardon me. Which has just a very different mood, very different lyrics. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. The way this album ends, I think was unexpected, and maybe I wasn't quite sure. To be honest, from the beginning, I was sort of like, how am I going to release this music? What am I trying to say with this as an album? Because usually you put out an album and it's like neat. It's 10 or 12 songs, and you can play each song, and there's little snippets, and some of them are happy, and some of them are sad, and some of them are slow, and some of them are fast, and you have an album's worth of material. This record was just a totally different beast. So the last two songs, I felt that I had to sort of finish my thought. I had to kind of come from the past into the present, but then take a slight detour to a different part of the past. It's almost like this sort of time travel thing that I'm doing. Over the Finish Line is the second to last song on the album, and it's a song that I'm singing from really the only song where it's entirely from my perspective. Me, Aoife O'Donovan, 21st century woman, mother, citizen, artist looking back at what I've just said. I think that there's a lot of sort of referencing of the previous songs that you've just heard. When you get to that point in the album, I'm kind of talking back to Carrie Chapman Catt almost, and talking about the current state of affairs and about how I feel that it's almost kind of ties into Age of Apathy in that way, that we're sort of not connecting in the same way, and what can we do about it? And I don't think I really come up with an answer in the song. It's more just if I could change a mind, whose mind would I want to change? If I could make something that would get us over the finish line, then it's almost like I throw up my shoulders and say, we're living in hard times. And it's an intense song to sing, and Anais Mitchell sang harmony on it so beautifully, and I feel like really helped me kind of get the the feeling across, the urgency that I was sort of talking about before. Just what can we do and how do we do it? And at the end of that song, I quote Carrie Chapman Catt and I sing, what is this democracy for which the world is battling? The song that I just had sang that long line in the previous song. And then I ask Carrie, I feel that we might have made our beds here. Like, have we? And it's really just a question.
Mm-hmm. It's a very, it's a down song.
It's a down song. There's nothing happy about it.
And that what you were feeling even after you wrote the rest of these songs?
It really is. And it's funny because, the question, America Come, the song that comes right before this, where it really ends with me and the girls and the brass, and we're singing, it's almost like a chant, like holding her torch high, like America, America. And then I think it's kind of the whiplash that I certainly have felt over the last, 8 years of existing in this time, this crazy time. And I sang about it in Age of Apathy. Mm-hmm. But the whiplash of kind of going back and forth between feeling really hopeful and just really dejected and wondering how we can do about it and what is our role? What is the role of the artist in throughout this?
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of American Tune, the Paul Simon song.
One of the great songs.
Right. But it's more downbeat.
Yeah, I mean, American Tune at least has that like really soaring bridge.
Yeah. You cut out the soaring bridge.
No soaring bridge in this one.
Well, it's interesting because the end you are addressing this to Carrie Chapman Catt, who the album really springs from. Mm-hmm. And I was particularly in the combination with America Come. By the time I got to the end of that song, I was wondering, what do you think when you talk about we're living in hard times? What do you think what do you think her answer to you would be?
Well, I think that the crazy thing is, and I read a lot of historical fiction and just looking, gosh, times are always hard. Times are always crazy. Mm-hmm. When you think about, I read recently, I read Libra by Don DeLillo, a great book, Lee Harvey Oswald, Kennedy, that whole time period was so crazy. Mm-hmm. Like that was so crazy. I feel like it's crazy now, but it's crazy in a different way. And everybody always thinks that what they're going through is like the craziest. Like, shit's crazy. Times are so hard. Technology, this. But if it wasn't technology, it was TV, or it was the Cubans, or it was whatever the fear du jour is. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's kind of what made me want to program the record this way. After that song, it goes into The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, which is living in hard times, 100% living in hard times. Those times were horrible for Hattie Carroll and for anybody in her situation.
Mm-hmm. And was that a song we're talking about the Bob Dylan song, of course. Is that a song you'd performed before?
I performed it live a few times with full orchestra.
Mm-hmm. Because it does end on
It ends on a very, very bad note.
No, but I don't mean the song itself, but it just ends the album on a strange...
It does.
Note.
It does.
And what's always interesting to me about that song is, he took the melody from another folk song, mm-hmm. I think an Irish folk song, probably. Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what the name of it is, but you're right.
Mary Hamilton.
Right.
But I think a lot of people, in casually hearing that song, think it's about something that happened long ago. It actually happened in
the 60s.
1963, she was killed.
Right.
But he makes it seem as though it's like something from old Baltimore in America.
Exactly. But no, it's very recent.
Right.
And I think that I really thought long and hard about if I wanted to put that song on the record at all, or if I wanted it to just be these neat 8 songs. And I think of it almost as a coda to the album. It's almost like the album does, psychically end after Over the Finish Line. And then you kind of go into this sort of dreamscape of just one more thing. Mm-hmm. And that arrangement, I find it so compelling. My friend Gabriel Kahane did that orchestral arrangement. And it's very stark. It starts with, just me singing the opening stanza after, of course, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And the orchestra comes in and it turns into this kind of wild, there's like a Viennese waltz section that he puts in. Mm-hmm. And then, but it does end, with now, bury your face deep in the rag. Now is the time for your tears.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me a little, I'm just thinking of this now, of the Faulkner book that has the bear, Go Down Moses.
One of the few Faulkner books I haven't read.
Well, you should, because it ends, it has the bear, which is that famous short story, which is indecipherable, but brilliant. Okay. But it ends with a very contemporary scene in a police station, and a mother's there, and her son's been arrested. It has that same kind of feeling.
Okay.
You should read it.
I will get it.
It's on the Broken Record reading list.
Great. I mean, I'm a huge Faulkner fan, but I guess like, Absalom, As I Lay Dying, Sound and Fury.
Yeah. Well, try this one.
Okay, I will.
They're short stories, but
Great.
they're connected.
Great.
And it's...
Oh, I'm excited. I'll go to the bookstore on the way home.
They're kind of brilliant. Do you want to play another song?
Sure.
Take us out?
What do you want? You want Elevators or do you want a new song?
You should play whatever song you think is gonna really move product. What would that be?
Who cares about product? But now I kind of want to play Elevators because I haven't played it in
Play
so long, and
All
it's
right.
like fun.
All right. Okay.
Okay, great.
Thanks so much to Aoife for coming by to talk about her project, All My Friends, and for performing some songs. And again, congratulations on the Grammy nominations. Best of luck to you. You can hear all of our favorite Aoife O'Donovan songs on a playlist at brokenrecordpodcast.com or in the episode description for this episode. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Broken Record Pod. You can follow us on Twitter at Broken Record. Broken Record is produced by Leah Rose with marketing help from Eric Sandler and Jordan McMillan. Our engineer is Ben Tolliday. Broken Record is a production of Pushkin Industries. And if you like this show, please remember to share, rate, and review us on your podcast app. Our theme music's by Kenny Beats. I'm Justin Richmond.